Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting this evening. Committee meetings will take place now. I'd like to welcome all of our viewing audience on YouTube and welcome the members of the media. I understand the Journal Pioneer, CBC, and others will be online following the meeting. And we have our CAO, Rob Philpott, with us. And we have our Deputy CAO and Director of Human Resources and our City Hall lawyer, Gordon McFarland, is with us, as well as our Police Chief, Dave Poirier, and our Director of Finance, Kristen Dunsford. And Brian Harlick is here celebrating his 29th birthday yesterday or today? Yesterday. He's running the controls and all members of council. And Greg Goody was with us, our electrical engineer. Welcome, Director Greg. So there are a couple of items on the agenda. I believe the first one was community services, but that date has been changed for that meeting. I believe, Councillor?
Yes, Your Worship. Downtown Summerside are just changing the date of their presentation to council.
Okay, we'll continue on then. I believe our Police and Fire and Emergency Services, Councillor Ramsey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, and welcome to everyone here this evening. I do have two items on police services. One being a four-way stop on Maple Avenue and Central Street. It's a very busy intersection, and Central Street is a throughway, and of course Maple Avenue, I believe, is a throughway as well, except there's stop signs on that one. Maple is a very busy street with Legier Park being there, and I think the traffic that comes down from Victoria Road, off of Granville Street, off of McEwen Road, they all come through there to get over to Summerside's northwest. If they live over there, they're going to use Maple to get across. So that intersection is usually quite congested, so I guess what the residents are asking for is a four-way stop over there just to kind of slow it down. And I know some of the conversation has been, well, Central Street's a throughway. I believe that Maple Street's a throughway as well, so we have to slow them down somehow. So that's my opinion on that, and I'm going to open the floor to anybody that might have some questions or concerns around that.
Could I just ask a question? I wonder, is Central Street more busy than Granville Street? Would the chief have those stats?
No, Your Worship, I don't have those stats.
Can you come up to the...
Maybe just take the microphone with you. Or
Thank you.
That's a portable mic there.
You just have to turn it on, Dave.
Turn it on, it takes a couple of seconds for it
There you go.
No, Your Worship, I don't have those stats for both streets, but Tech Services does do a data count every week, so we can certainly ask those questions of Director Aaron to get those stats for us. I mean, there's no doubt they're both busy streets.
Yes.
If I was taking a guess, probably Granville Street is worse because of the malls up north. So, well, we can get those figures.
Do you say worse or better?
Well, I think the traffic is more intense on Granville, I would suggest.
I think it probably is too, but I also know when I'm coming into town, I'll go to Central just to avoid Granville. So I think, like you say, Chief Poirier, I think Central Street's fairly busy as well, and I think it's fairly busy with Legier Park being there. I think, and a lot of children being around there, that we really should consider doing something about it. So I don't know who was next, if it was Councillor Snow or
I think I was, but
okay.
I guess all I can add is while I was campaigning, it was that is the sort of the corner of my ward and Barb's ward
And
Norma's. Some of the residents in that area definitely expressed a concern with that intersection. basically the speed of traffic going through it, and seeing a number of accidents at that intersection is what they mentioned to me, that they felt it was something to be looked at, a four-way stop possibly. That said, I know we do have, or there was supposed to be, that's supposed to be the location of our 3D crosswalk. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out as well if we're putting a 3D crosswalk there. But I definitely believe that intersection, something has to happen to try to slow people down. I think we recall Notre Dame Park, the Billy Bridges Park, we had some discussions over four-way stops, and you know, we shouldn't put one there because of X reason, this reason, but I can tell you since it's been there, it's worked great at controlling the traffic in that area, and the residents around there really appreciated that. So the only caution I would have personally would be seeing that we are attempting to look at the 3D crosswalks and how they may work to control the speed of traffic or help that. I'd hate to get too many things going on at one intersection all at once, but I'm definitely 100% in favor of seeing something done at that intersection, because residents of mine have expressed that as being an area of concern. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Snow. Councillor Duran.
Thanks, Councillor Ramsey. I guess I'm a bit reluctant to support it right out of the gate without some stats or insight, at least from staff. I know you mentioned that you considered Maple a throughway, but it's really only a few blocks from Granville to, where does it end, Elm Street, or?
Oh, it's a long street, yeah, it goes right down into
Jennifer.
Elm and right around to Jennifer.
Yeah, but that's only, what, 4 blocks from Granville? You go
No.
Granville, Central,
Yes. Granville
a
Center.
couple more, like it's not a throughway, it's a.
No, there's multiple stops.
I guess I'm just maybe starting to get a little, not scared, but worried the precedent that we have set, putting stop signs up just on our own volition. You know, if residents are requesting, if we put a stop sign up every time a resident requested one, the whole city would be covered in stop signs. Now, saying that, I don't mean I'm against it. I'd like to talk about it and maybe get some insight from staff. And like Councillor Snow stated, there is something coming to that intersection, and I 100% agree that there's something needed there. 100%. I'm just a little reluctant today to say, yes, I support a 4-way stop.
Yeah, and I thank you for that input, Justin. I guess what you're not remembering is last year it came as well. This is the second time bringing this corner forward. There was concern then, and apparently the city did do the research, and you know, they didn't feel because I think Central Street was a throughway, that they didn't want to stop the traffic there was what the answer was. But we're still getting the concerns, and we're still getting the complaints, and Legier Park is still there, and there's lots of children around there, and there's lots of speeding on Central Street. So I guess, you know, if residents want me to look at this again, then that's why I'm bringing it forward. Again, it's that same old thing. Unless you live in the area and you're witnessing it, then it's easy to say it's not a problem. But I have to take their word for it, and I do travel that street a lot myself. So.
And I agree, you're doing what you should do, and
Yeah.
I agree something should be done there. Whether it's a stop sign or not, I don't know, but
Right. Yeah.
let's talk about it.
I wonder
for
what we
sure.
can do,
Yeah.
right? So thank you for that. I appreciate that, Justin. And Deputy Mayor,
Okay.
I think
I
you're
actually
next.
have 2 things on streets. So for your first point that you're talking about, again, I'm certainly not against it. I know that there are many busy streets, and safety becomes an issue or whatnot. I think I ran into that on a couple of streets in the ward that I represent, and like you say, you bring it forward on behalf of the resident. But when the testing or, you know, the science behind it is given, I find what happens sometimes is people see other streets getting it, so it's like, why not our street? So I think that's sometimes what happens. I'm not saying it in your case, but I know I've run into it a few in my ward, and sometimes explaining that, you know, it has been tested or has been looked at, or it's a shorter street, that it, you know, it really creates almost like a jam of traffic or a bottleneck. So I think we have to look at both sides of it and really, you know that if it is a really busy street. And the other point I wanted to bring up, I did have an email which I sent to senior management on Harvard Street concerning speeding. And it starts usually down around by Advance Rentals, comes all the way up at different times of the day for this family. They're sitting on their porch, they can see it happening, they have young children, and they're very concerned. And I was speaking with Chief Dave about it before our meeting, and I know that you had mentioned that there was some things this weekend that tickets were issued or whatnot.
Yes, Deputy Mayor McCollum, our members laid a couple of speeding charges in that area, and we will continue to monitor it. Just for everyone's information too, complaints are coming in left and right about motorcycles, and we got a gentleman the other day for this stunting. They do their wheelies, so we were able to. He crashed, and somebody's going to be killed, but we were able to get him. So maybe you send a message across some heavy fines with this.
Thank you. One of the things that some of the residents have asked on Harvard Street that are watching this happen at different times of the day, would the city or through Summerside Police Services ever consider at least assessing to see if a speed bump would help, similar to as on Arcona Street, where it might just sort of calm that traffic down from speeding. So I just said that I would bring it up tonight. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just getting back to that for a minute, and I know, Bruce, I'm going to come to you. One of the things, and talking about a throughway, I didn't mean a throughway as that there's no stop signs there. I meant a throughway as an artery. It's one of the main arteries coming over to the northwest side of town. If you're coming into town or you're coming off Granville Street, that's usually the street that you'll use to get over to that area of town. That's what I meant by throughway. I guess I wasn't correct on my term, but anyway, I mean main artery. Go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was just going to say that, you know, Central, Granville, South, and Water Street are main arteries to the city, and I'm sure not in love with speeders, although I've probably spent a little bit of my life, as Justin had said, I think it was Justin that said we had done a thing last year on this, right? And it was
on the same
yeah,
street.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in seeing what the results are again. But we got to remember that it is a main artery to the city. How do we slow them down, right? And I know that's the spot I believe that we're putting the 3D. Was that the spot that we were doing? One of them?
That's
the
one.
3D. I'd like to see how that is, how effective that works. I think if we put in a stop sign and a 3D, I think it's overkill, and I don't think that we'd get the full results of the 3D. So, or would we ever know? So, anyway, I would just like to see the city investigating a little more before I support stop sign at this time.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I think that the crosswalk that we're talking about has nothing to do with the traffic. It has to do with pedestrians, right? So what my concern is, and what people are talking about, the children in the park and playing in the park, that would be most of the pedestrians there. That's certainly a concern, but I think what the folks are talking to me about is that you're parked on Maple and you can't get out. There's so much traffic. Like, I think that's what's happening, right? Because it is a busy street coming through. So, and the other thing on Central Street is, how do we slow them down? Like, we have to make a decision on how we slow them down. We can't just say, well, we'll do another study and then nothing happens, like the same thing that happened last year. We have to make a decision, and if there's too much speeding and too much traffic there, then we have to make a decision. That's where I am with it. So, Councillor, who was first? Greg Campbell, go ahead. Councillor Campbell.
I have to agree with Justin. I got 3 complaints last year
we done the counts on 3 of the places, and one warranted some action and 2 of them didn't. It was surprising the difference in what was perceived and what actually was happening, especially the one on Craig. We kind of figured they were all heading for McDonald's, the kids at dinner time sort of thing, and when we done the traffic count, the speeders were going in the other direction. They were heading out of McDonald's. So I don't know if it was bad food or what, but it's funny how it was exactly the opposite of what you would assume it would be until you get the actual count. And I don't have a trouble of, if the count warrants it, turn it over to our directors and let them go at it, but I don't think we should be making, like, I don't know which one it wouldn't be fair for me to judge on it because I'm not around that area.
Right.
So, but I can judge on a report.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, and Brian McFeely?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of have the same sentiment. I'd like to see some traffic counts and sort of understand the numbers a bit. I know the main thoroughfares are, McEwen Road, I get complaints there constantly about speeding, but I'm not sure a 4-way stop halfway down McEwen Road is the answer to resolving the speeding situation. And I think, we should put it back to staff to come back with a recommendation on that particular corner. I'm not necessarily opposed to it because I think the playground is another dynamic there that we need to take into consideration. But I think we should let the professionals take a look, a very serious look at it and bring back a recommendation on it.
Okay.
Just one last thing in closing. I agree with basically everything everybody's saying. We need to really take a look at this. But the one thing that keeps coming up and has come up when we knocked on every door is speeding around the city and throughout the city as a whole. Every time we come into any of these conversations, that goes back to speeding and how can we control the speeding. And I know we've made a request to staff to really look at this, but we really need to consider this, because I know how many streets in mine, like Northumberland, Watered, along the boardwalk, like there's a number of streets where I keep getting complaints about the speed of vehicles. So at the end of the day, that's the issue. We have a lot of speeding going on in our city, is right across the province. The reports have been out, so we have to find a way that we're going to effectively deal with these issues, policing wise and other means to address it. So that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
I just have one quick question. I'm sorry, I just need my memory refreshed. So was there a study done last year when you requested it?
Apparently so. It was right after, because that was one of the things I heard on the campaign. And so I brought it to council and brought it to the meeting, and they said there would be a study done, and then, it never, so it didn't amount to anything at that point. So I'm still getting the same complaints and the same concerns, except, in the summertime it's worse because the park's open and there's so many children around there, and then there's parking on both sides of the streets on Maple, and I'm getting that complaint too. So anyway, so I just have to bring it forward again, and I would like to see staff do a study. And Mayor Basil, did you have something to add?
Just a thought on it. University Avenue, I understand, is the busiest street on the island. And I don't know if they have any stop signs. They have lights, I guess.
They have lots of lights.
A number of intersections. And maybe we should consider both streets when they're doing the stats. When I say both streets, Granville and Central. Because if one is twice as busy as the other, or whatever, I don't know. Maybe they're the same, I'm not sure. But if they're going to get stats, it would be nice to have them on both streets. And somebody had mentioned the main arteries. Water Street is the main artery, but I think they're all traffic lights, no stops signs, if I remember correctly. And I don't think there are any stop signs in South Drive, or lights. And oh yeah, out there at the beginning there, yeah. And I think McEwen Road has got one in Walker and McEwen, but that's after the. There's no issue there. Yeah, so.
On McEwen.
And Central was changed from lights to a 4-way flashing sign a couple of years ago, I guess, for stop sign. But it would be nice to have the stats, and thank you, Barb, or Councillor Ramsey, for bringing this to the council's attention. they'll come back, staff, I understand, will be coming back with some stats and information, and that's when it can be decided, I guess.
Okay.
And there is a new crosswalk, one of the new crosswalks on McEwen Road, the new design one.
So do you have
Anybody
a
wants to have a
suggested
look at
date
that?
for when that, I know this is a busy time of the year, Chief, but when's the busiest time, I guess, for stats to be done? That's when-
I'm just wondering, Your Worship, if I could just interject just for a minute. Thank you, Councillor Ramsey, for bringing this up this evening. What we were hoping to do, if we could beg Council's patience and forgiveness for just a few minutes, just to bring you back to our budget discussions back in earlier this year, where Council gave us direction to develop a traffic management strategy, and the various, as we all know, it's a multi-layered type of issue with lots of considerations. And what we were trying to do is to come up with some sort of a consistent approach that can be applied equally across the board. When I say across the board, across the city, in terms of addressing the areas of need. And many of you have come to us with requests for, like, considering speed bumps, bumped up enforcement in certain areas, four-way stop signs, parking on both sides of the road is a concern in various areas as well. And also we've heard some talk about and some concerns around crosswalks and how those are, I guess, there's different conceptions of crosswalks throughout the city, and why can't we just have a consistent approach across the board? So definitely a lot of multiple layers to this particular type of traffic management. So, and what we've started to hear from you this evening was, like, relying on the evidence and pointing to, like, where are the areas of concern, and bringing that information back to Council for consideration. But we have done some work to address some of the requests that you've brought forward, and what I want to do is just, if it's okay with members of Council and Your Worship, just I'd like to turn it over to Gordon just to take a few minutes just to talk about some of the more recent stuff that's been brought to our attention and some of the work that we're trying to address. And then we can have a discussion flowing from that as well.
Sure.
And maybe some direction that Council may want to give to us in that respect as well.
Floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So I don't really have a thorough presentation to give you, but I did want to just speak to, as CEO has noted, you know, the complaints come in mostly through citizens, through Council, and we have been logging all those complaints, putting them in the queue to gather data on the areas where they're notified. To Councillor Campbell's point, quite often, and I'd say more than most of the time, when the stats come back in, the speeding issue is not necessarily what it's perceived to be. We have a number of streets where we've measured where the amount of speeders is under 3%. You know, you get 1,000 cars through in a day, and 3% are going over the time 20 kilometers an hour. That said, we are looking at trying to implement some things. I don't know if there's if there were a solution to how to fix the speeding problem. Obviously, some community would have figured it out a long time ago and would be doing it. It's a multi-pronged issue with likely a whole bunch of things that we can do to help. But I think if our goal is to eliminate speeding, we're just kind of setting ourselves up for failure. Enforcement is key, obviously, and our police do as much enforcement as they can, understanding that with traffic, the enforcement is predominantly around DUIs and kind of impaired driving type of thing. But our police do a significant amount of traffic enforcement in the community. And but they are tasked with a lot of other higher priority issues. We have just as of even today, we're going to purchase some lawn signs actually, and we're copying an idea that they're using in Stratford right now. And it's very simple, but if I believe there's speeding going on in my street, well, there's a little lawn sign that I can put on my front lawn to help remind the folks in my subdivision around, just to ask them to drive slower. You know, one thing we never talk about is what the actual speed limits are and whether they're appropriate or not. You know, there are areas in town where we've lowered the speed limit. It was 60 at one point, now it's down to 40. And then does that change the perception of people's perception on what's speeding or not? It obviously does, but if we very rarely look at accident stats. You know, we talk a lot about speeding, but in general, a lot of the vehicular traffic will drive to a safe speed limit. You know, if there are no rules at all, most people will drive to a safe speed. So that's another approach that we need to look at. But I guess I will say that all the complaints that are coming in, we are logging them, we are trying to get the data on them. When the data comes back and is noting that there's a concern, we absolutely will try to act on it. But to Councillor Dwyer's point, it does become a challenge if, you know, a resident or a couple residents or multiple residents in an area just say, I want a stop sign. In some instances, it may be, I don't say perfectly appropriate, but it may be an area where, you know what, put a stop sign in there, doesn't really affect anybody other than the people that live right there. In other circumstances where you're dealing with a major artery, you know, if I'm a resident and I can say, listen, I think there should be a stop sign here, but the data doesn't really warrant it at all, and all of a sudden we put one in, then we may be satisfying one resident and upsetting, you know, 20,000 other motorists, right? So that's really the update. Anecdotally, just on the intersection that we're talking about tonight, I lived in the area for 10 years. Everybody around there knew where I worked. No one ever mentioned it to me. And that's not to say that it is or isn't an issue, but just my own going through that intersection, and other than in the morning school times, I've never seen it be a tough intersection to get through, or traffic being too congested one way or the other. But we do have a speed sign at the top of Central Street, right? We do have a speed radar sign coming down, and that was implemented likely about 10 years ago, Chief. And we have found those signs to be effective reminders to people. And we have talked in here about purchasing more of those. We did purchase 2 last year and put them up. They're a different model than the other ones, and they don't flash the warning sign. They're a little, but they're also an avenue that we have to gather data with those units as well. So that's about it.
Yeah,
I guess we're just kind of reminiscing here a bit, but everybody remembers the 70s and the 80s when Bill Maxwell was a policeman in St. Helens.
mm-hmm.
I was just going to say that everybody on the island and in Summerside, when they got to St. Helens, the first thing they did was hit the brakes.
Right.
And he told me when he left there, when he started there, the traffic was flying, but when he left there, he said, I can honestly say there never was a fatality in his area. So he had the reputation of slowing the traffic down, and maybe the Chief Poirier remembers Bill. I'm saying that, God rest his soul, he's gone now, but that's the way he slowed his traffic down. And
It was
I
effective.
know we're living in a different era, and probably 10 times as many cars now as back then, I don't know. But anyway,
Bill Maxwell
difference.
could park his car on the end of the driveway and go away for a week, and he could scare everybody from taking their pedestrian.
but he kept the traffic slow.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a comment.
Well, thank you, and I'm just going to get to you in a second, Brian. And I understand some of the stuff you're saying, Gordon, but we don't live in a lot of these areas, and I know you said you lived in that area, but there's an area just at the next corner where we got video where 5 vehicles flew through the stop sign, 5 different videos. And so it is happening, whether we see it or whether we don't, it's happening, and it's happening for the residents. They're seeing it, and we're not living there, so we're not seeing it. But
I'm not suggesting, I did say I lived and traveled through that intersection
right,
thousands. I'm saying I never my opinion, anecdotally come through that intersection, I never noticed that. I mean, four-way stops are not meant to slow traffic down, they're meant for traffic flow, right? And we've had this discussion many times, and I completely understand that in a lot of traffic issues, it's more perception than reality, and sometimes we get into a discussion around perception of what we're doing as well, but four-way stops are meant for when there's a certain traffic flow coming from all directions, right?
Right.
And so we had a study done last year on that intersection, and what the results were, you mentioned earlier that nothing came of it. Well, certainly something came of it. We got evidence that said it didn't support a four-way stop based on the traffic flows and the speeds that were coming through there.
Right.
So all I said was I've lived in that intersection. The other intersection that we were discussing today, I said I've traveled through many times. Certainly there are a number of people and drivers, and we're all likely guilty of it, who blow through stop signs from time to time.
I don't.
But
Well, I don't.
but that's an enforcement issue, right? There's
Right. Yes.
different signage is not gonna, a brighter sign, a different sign, a purple sign versus a yellow sign versus a red sign. If somebody's blowing through a stop sign, that's an enforcement issue.
But if 5 people are blowing through a stop sign, then there's a problem, right? And so we have to do something at that corner of Highland and Duke. So that's, and you know, I get that if you do a study that you get all kinds of results, but there was a study done on Notre Dame and Duke Street as well. And the four-way stop in there is just so welcomed by everybody in that area. I've gotten so many thank yous, and I didn't do it, Corey did it. But you know, so we have to listen to the people that live in the community as well, I think is what I'm trying to say. I get the study, and we can do a study every year, you know, and spend money on doing studies. But we all, at some point, we have to listen to the residents and say, you know what, it's about keeping people safe, and that's what I'm feeling.
And certainly, Councillor Ramsey, we certainly don't disagree. I guess all we're trying to do is just, from our perspective, we're just trying to present you with the evidence so that council can make an informed decision.
Yes,
that's all, right?
And I appreciate that.
That's all.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, just, I guess the final comment is, and a question more than that is, you know, the work that you're doing around this traffic calming strategy that you've been working on. I think I did a presentation back, I don't even know if it was this council or the council before, some of the research that, and I wouldn't say it's deep research, but research around communities that have been successful in calming traffic, and there's the 3 E's, I guess, that engineering, education, and enforcement are the common threads, I guess, that of the communities that have been successful. And by successful, I mean they've reduced speeding maybe by 10%. As Gordon says, you're never going to eliminate it, but you know, 10% is considered to be pretty good in reducing the speeding in the city. So I hope whatever comes back to us will speak to those 3 areas in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Councillor McFeely. And you know, I guess we're all done here, but I would suggest then that we do the study. I would also suggest whatever you come back with, it's up to council to make the decision around, you know, whether we're going to listen to the residents or we're going to listen to the study. And I'll just leave it at that. And I know, Mayor, you'd like to say something.
Well, just a closing comment there. I'm just wondering what timing for this. How long does it take to do this? Is it a month or 2, or should we put a diary date on this to come back with some stats so council will know, you know, when the report is coming back?
It's just a count, It's not a study. It's a count of actual traffic. So make a decision.
I would hope that within a month we'd have something. I will say, I mean, we are getting inundated with requests for study this street, study this street, study this street, study this street, and we are putting them all into a queue. So where, like, I'm sure we can access the stats that we just had done a year ago on this intersection, but to get new stats on this one, right now there is a queue of, we're studying every complaint that comes in, right? So it's up to council, if you wish, to give us direction on if you want to make a certain area a priority or not. But I'll also say that most of the traffic counts that we've gotten back, you know, the complaint has come in, you know, this is a speedway, this is a raceway, whatever, and then the stats come back and the stats don't bear that out. So, in terms of education, we also have a perception issue, right? And let's leave it at that.
But we could also be doing our stats in the middle of the day, right? Where maybe the traffic on Water Street is probably in the evening where cars are.
24 hours.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like when we're getting complaints from people that live on Water Street, which we're getting plenty, Corey, you know,
The number of vehicles.
yeah,
48 hours.
yeah, okay. Anyway, that was just, yeah.
So the stats that you're coming after, you're going after the ones that are speeding, or just the number of cars on the street?
Measures all the traffic through an area, number of cars, and the speed that they're going
Oh, okay.
through an area, so.
Councillor Durant, and then go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor Ramsey. Maybe I missed something, but if we just did a study on Maple and Central,
A year ago,
Year
I
ago.
think, yeah.
why do we need to do another one?
After the election, because we're still getting complaints on it.
But if the data's likely the same, it's just gonna be the same.
Well, I don't know, if
count
it was your
again.
resident, what would you tell them? Would you say, we just did one a year ago, we're not gonna do another one? Like, we have to act on what people are asking for, right? So, that would be why, I would think.
Sure, I mean, I'm just
Or-
looking for some reasoning, like,
I have an elderly
We have the
gentleman
data
up in
already.
Walker, if
Just-
anything that moves,
Yeah.
he says is speeding.
Yeah, just a second there. That's what
no, that's it. I guess I'm just wondering if we're gonna direct staff to do another count and have them use their time and their resources and the money. We have the data already from last year. Can we not act and discuss based on that data?
Well, nothing happened last year, so that means nothing would happen this year.
It wasn't
That's
recommended.
incorrect.
So be it.
Something did happen. We
Yeah.
gathered the data. It didn't support a four-way
Right.
stop. So a decision was made not to move forward with a four-way stop. That happened. That's something.
Decision by council,
Correct.
not the staff.
I would
Can't
say-
we just
So-
get more data, more data, more data, more data,
Yeah.
more data until,
I don't recall it coming back on that intersection myself, but I don't recall
Why
that
don't we check
intersection
that?
coming
Brian, can you check that out?
back for
Whether that came
discussion.
back last year?
It did, it came back from the police department, it wasn't recommended at this time.
Yeah.
Then why would it be recommended this time?
I think we're starting to spin in circles
Yeah.
quite a bit here for one thing, but the last comment I wanna say, I think, and his worship mentioned, I think the best study was already done with, Mr. Maxwell that was out in St. Elders. If we increase our enforcement of speeding, however, if we have to put more funding into our police department to make sure that we have more traffic enforcement, then it bears the evidence that I think what people are saying is true. If you get a ticket for speeding, you tend to slow down, and I truly believe, and I remember our very first budget, I asked Chief, you know, is our police budget enough? Do we have enough officers? And I truly believe we can do more traffic enforcement in the city that would improve overall safety, but that's a bigger discussion to have. I really believe we have all these complaints about speeding, there has to be some legitimacy to it, and I do believe enforcement is a deterrent for speeding, so, however we get there, we gotta get somewheres, but we can spin in circles forever.
Yeah, that's right.
And I guess just one point I would add to that, Councillor Snow and Gordon already touched on that, or on this, is that we have had several requests come in for like checking traffic flow and traffic counts and speeding in various areas, and we are trying to get to them as expeditiously as we can. If you'll pardon the pun, I know we're trying to move as fast as we can with the traffic study, so to speak, but we are trying to do the best we can to get you the information, and we'll
Trying
continue
to-
to do that,
Trying
right,
to speed things up.
Okay.
as it were.
All right, so that's everything on that. So did you want to say something,
Well, just-
Justin?
we didn't really I mean, are we
Well, that's what I'm
doing
going
it
to
again
do.
or not? Like-
Well, that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to either, are we going to go ahead and do a study? If there was one done last year, that doesn't mean anything to me because it's a problem again this year. So if that means we have to do another study to keep the residents happy, or we need to put more police officers out there, I'm willing to do whatever we need to do, but we need to do something.
So when you're doing the stat study, sorry, then I'll finish here. I didn't jump ahead of anybody, I don't think.
No.
Are you talking just Central Street? Are you talking Granville? The two streets are parallel, and which one?
Central and Maple that we were talking,
If the request from a resident or multiple residents is for a four-way stop at Central and Maple, then we would do traffic studies, traffic count and study on on that area to try to identify whether or not a four-way stop is warranted.
And you can have that information, did you say in a month?
No, I said
I had it last year. It's done.
correct.
I don't
Again,
understand.
the complaints are coming in and we're putting them in a queue to get the traffic measured. If council wishes to make this one a priority versus all the other ones that are coming in, you can direct staff that way.
Well, I could ask the two other councillors who are on the same ward, or who have that particular area, and we can, what do you guys, I mean, what do you want to do with it? I mean, I'm getting complaints, you're getting complaints, and you're getting complaints, so, on this one, yeah.
It's of my opinion right now, based on everything we've been talking about, based on the fact that we're putting a 3D crosswalk there, that we have some thought that that might tend to slow down traffic in there. We think that might make that intersection a bit safer. If, to Justin's point, if we already have a study, I don't recall the numbers from that study. If we already have a study and it was a year ago, I don't know if there's need for another study as opposed to bring that study back to council and say, here's what we found at that intersection, because I don't know if it changed. The complaints a year ago are probably the same complaints we're receiving now. So that information probably hasn't changed much in my opinion. I do know it was a concern of residents in that intersection that they thought it was a little bit of a dangerous intersection with the speed on Central and the cross traffic coming off Maple. How we get there, like I said, I feel we get spinning in circles. I think we can get there a lot quicker if we take that data back and we see what happens when we do get the 3D crosswalk in there, which my understanding is relatively soon, and see how that's helping that intersection and go from there. But that's my opinion as of right now.
Okay, I wonder if I could make a suggestion, since it's, Central Maple Street. I wonder if we could give direction to council tonight to have a look at the work that has already been done, and then bring it back to our monthly council meeting, and we can look at there. It's a matter of a couple of weeks if it's already been done. That gives us a chance to hear the numbers and the count and everything, instead of redoing another traffic study. And then that gives us a couple of weeks to really think it through, maybe talk. We're definitely going to get feedback from our residents. That will give us a chance to really be able to give direction to senior management. So I'm just wondering if everybody would be agreeable to that.
If I could just make a quick comment to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Because we did the stats last year. I don't know, there may be more traffic this year, I don't know. And we talked about this during the budget in regards to Greenwood Drive. And I think there was discussion that we're preparing for a year or two when the traffic increases because of the park, that it may mean lights at the corner of Greenwood Drive and Pope. So we anticipated that to increase traffic. And we're not 100% sure, maybe traffic has increased on Central Street. And if Pope and Central is done, or whenever it's done, it's not if, it's just whenever it's done, that may increase the traffic on Central and may not, I don't know. So
I'm no traffic engineer, I fully admit that, but increased traffic on Central Street will not warrant putting a stop sign on it, right? It's the amount of traffic that's coming at it at an intersection from all directions. And I don't really want to speak about stuff that I only have pamphlet knowledge on, but I do know that a main through street like Central Street, increased traffic does not mean, oh, that means that we need a stop sign, because the streets are made for traffic to move, right? And stop signs are there for when cars have to stop to safely allow for people to get through an intersection, right? So it's the traffic going on Maple Avenue that is the important piece in terms of whether or not it needs a four-way stop or traffic lights. As we, Greenwood Drive is a prime example, right? The traffic counts today indicated that, adding some left turning lanes would improve things. At some point, the traffic coming at all directions may warrant
So that's why I
Right.
mentioned Greenwood Drive, because it's possible that the traffic on Maple Street will increase because of the new park and because of the traffic coming with
Yeah.
Polk Road being done.
Potentially, yeah.
But
And
Maple
that's
already
why-
has stop signs, whereas Greenwood Drive also already had stop signs, so it's the same. Nobody added a stop sign.
And that's the
Greenwood.
only reason that I anecdotally said I lived there for 10 years, and going on Maple Avenue both ways, turn left, turn right, coming at it from the east and west. I never noticed a time where I had to wait more than, the normal amount of time.
To follow this up on the councillor's, the chair's suggestion, what decision we're making here to come back and to when, and what is the wishes? I know,
I think Councilor McCormick just laid out a kind of reasonable path forward, so if that's amenable to council.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's fine. Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone. The other thing is Rufus Street, which is right down at Credit Union Place. The complaints there are from the residents that live on that street. The only time it is a problem is when there is an event at Credit Union Place, which in the wintertime, there's hockey all winter, there's concerts, there's all kinds of things that go on there. Vehicles are parking on both sides of the street. If a fire truck had to get through there, they probably couldn't at that time. So what they're asking for is that there just be parking on one side, like there is down by Sunny's. We put 2 no parking signs on one side of the street, and now they can park along the opposite side. They would like the same down their end of the street as well. It's a very short street, so it's not, there's probably only 2 or maybe 1, 2, 3. There might be 3 parking spots that would have to come out of there in order for everybody just to park on one side. So I'm bringing that forward tonight from a couple of the residents down who live on that street. There are only a couple who live down there, so. Anyway, and I have to agree with them. I live down there as well. And when I walk over to Credit Union Place and there's cars parked on both sides of the streets, it's pretty dangerous. So anyway, that's what I'm bringing forward, and I'll open the floor to that.
Just for information of council, Rufus, north of Notre Dame, already has no parking on both sides.
That's right, yeah. So right in front of Credit Union Place, there's no parking on both sides.
North of Notre Dame, yes.
That's right, yeah, yeah. So the only problem is a little, and then south of Notre Dame, right down at the very end where the dairy bar is, there's no parking there. So there's just one small section where there is parking, but it's on both sides, and it's pretty congested when that happens.
So municipal services just put up the no parking on the lower end of Rufus. It was passed at last month's resolution.
Yeah, right out in front of, yeah, that's right. So the problem is just up the next corner.
Up to North Market?
So there is no parking up to North Market.
Yeah.
The only parking is from North Market to Notre Dame, which there's 1, 2, 3, 4 houses there. So most of it is driveway anyway, but there would be maybe 2 spots that probably could use a no parking spot sign, and then everybody just park on the other side of the street.
but if people live there, councillor, and they only got 2 spots out front, having lived through this for 25 or 30 years, somebody losing a parking spot out in front of their home, we'll hear about it.
It's not the people that live there that park there. They all have double driveways.
No, my point is, if they're expecting visitors and they can't have their
They can park right across the street.
Or that's-
There's still parking, they're just not, so you're just there's really nowhere, so and I'm gonna say this, it doesn't matter, so Sean Gallant lives in one house and Barry Ford lives in another, and Barry has a double driveway, then there's maybe a short area, and then he has a double driveway. So there's really nowhere to park there anyway, but they are parking on both sides.
But if they're having company and their parking spots out front for their company, there's somebody visiting them, whether it's a brother, sister, aunt, or uncle, and they got no place to park in front. I lived through these before where parking spaces were taken from homes.
Yeah.
And then we heard about it afterwards, that where's my mother gonna park when she comes to see me, sort of thing.
Right.
I'm just trying to visualize the area.
Well, it's them that's asking for the no parking. That's who's asking for it, is the people that who live, like Barry lives there. And he said it's just very dangerous. There's no way for an emergency vehicle to get down there. So I'm just bringing forward what,
I think it's fairly simple. If Councillor Ramsey has been talking to the residents, and the residents are saying the ones that live there have no concerns, if that's what you're saying, Councillor Ramsey, then I don't know what the concern is. So obviously, if we remove parking from one side of the street, people are gonna realize that they're gonna have to park on the other side of the street. It's just.
but what's happening is they're parking on both sides.
Right. But
Right.
what I'm saying is.
When
if
there's
the
an
res-
event.
If the residents of that area are asking for it, I don't see what the issue really is. If they're not, if it's only one resident, then to his worship's point, you might run into some issues with some residents not wanting to lose their parking. But if what you're saying, Councillor Ramsey, is the residents where Rufus isn't a very long street, so if there's, I don't know, 5, 6, 4 houses on that street, if Councillor Ramsey, if you go and speak with the residents and they don't have an issue with parking being eliminated on one side, I don't see why we're sitting here arguing about it. To be honest, it's.
I don't think they argue. I think there's
No, but
discussion.
or discussion, or whatever you wanna call it.
But we
I
put a sidewalk in there, right? So that's a very narrow street. So if you have a car, the sidewalk, and then a car, and then another car, like, you don't have much room. You're certainly not gonna get cars going both ways on that street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only, the problem is only when there's an activity going on at Credit Union Place. That's the only time there's any parking there. There's a business there. In fact, there's 2 businesses on that street, and they have their parking, so it's not, anyway, Councillor Duran.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. I think I'm pretty much in agreement with what Councillor Snow said and what you're saying. If an emergency vehicle can't get through, then they can't get through, and they need to get through. If the residents don't have a problem with it, if they're the ones requesting it, great. As long as it doesn't, in that little section, is it the same side of the street the whole way down that
Yes, it's
parking can be
all
on?
parking on one side.
So they're not blocking like fire hydrants?
No,
Okay.
no.
So how do
Yes,
you
Council-
sum this up? Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
Councillor Ramsey. I brought this up about a month ago, about a specific street in the ward that I represent, and it's the same thing. And I think we have to be careful. We have to listen to our residents. It's really important. But also, I think we have to remember that people are listening to this. So if it's being done in one area and some street has already been told, no, we can't do that. Even when I have heard from those residents that they watched a fire truck trying to come down the street and they couldn't get through because of the 2-sided parking. And then, as our mayor has pointed out, that some people rely on that parking space if they have company, if they have somebody. So all I'm trying to say, are we going to do it for one street and not another street? Is that being fair? It's not.
Right.
So I think we really have to look at it and really remember that there's all areas of the city that this is either going to create a domino effect or it's going to create disgruntled residents that are saying, well, how come you're doing it there, but I asked and I can't?
Yes,
And that's where I'm coming from.
Right, and I get that, and I think my argument is because not everybody lives beside Credit Union Place. And when there's a huge event going on, that's where they're kind of in danger, I think, Norma.
And I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that comment when there's events. But you know what? When it is affecting people that live in a property or have problems getting down, they have young children, their complaints and their concerns are just as important. And I don't want to be a counselor that says, well, I'm sorry, you don't live in a really busy area. To them, it's a problem. So we have to find a way that it's very fair.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm saying, and so I'm just speaking for my residents in my ward who are asking for a no parking on one side of the street on Rufus. So I think Bruce is next.
Yeah, no, the only question I have, is this a problem that has happened since we put the sidewalk in?
No, I think it's always been there.
Well, it's strange because we've had hundreds of events there, and I'm sure that the fire department, the police department, if there was plugging up of the streets, that the people would have been notified, and this would have came to the table long before this. So I just, as I was listening to it, I figured it must have been since we put the sidewalk in. But anyway, it's, you know, we have to be fair. And I don't see this as a big issue because there's only a couple of houses involved. But we have to be fair right across the city. You know, we can't just say, okay, have a look at this and do it or whatever, right? But I'd like to see the police department have a look at this.
Sure.
I'm not saying that I'm not going to support it, but
Right.
I'd like to, instead of, you know, just us approving it here right now,
Yeah.
I'd like to see the police department have a look and the fire department and let them come back with a recommendation to this committee.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can do that. And Justin, I know you have something
Thanks.
there.
Just a
Thanks,
final,
Bruce.
just a final thought, I guess. I think to use your word, Deputy Mayor Coleman, if a disgruntled resident, if the resident's disgruntled because a fire truck can't get to their house, I think that trumps a resident that's disgruntled because their mother-in-law can't park out front for a night. I don't, and I agree that it should be a city-wide, maybe a new policy or a bylaw. If there's no room for our widest truck plus 10 feet, maybe we have to say we're only parking on one side. I don't know, but I think, I mean, I don't think it's a problem for any police vehicles. They're all, you know, the widest one is probably the pickup or the SWAT van if you need them. But I think if the biggest fire truck can't fit through somewhere, then that's a problem.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Period.
So maybe, thank you,
Everywhere,
Justin.
not just Rufus, not
Right,
just Ward.
right.
Yeah.
So I think then, could we have someone do some measurements? Would that be a fair request?
Yep. And we'll get fire and police just to take a look at it, do some measurements, bring back a recommendation to council.
Right, so they measure that if we have the sidewalk and then we have a vehicle,
Yep.
then we have another vehicle on the other side, how much is in there
Yep.
for cars to get through?
How
and
much clearance. And,
Right, the clearance. Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Okay, and that's everything on police, wow, okay. That was just 2 items, I'm glad. Thank you, guys.
Was there something else that, was there one?
No, there was just a couple of questions that I had, but when community services didn't take place, I just wanted to direct a question to you, Councillor Corey. I've had a question concerning the boardwalk, and I wonder if you might check with Director JP and come back with it maybe at the monthly meeting if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the residents that are using it, residents and seniors that are using wheelchairs and walkers, they're really, really enjoying the boardwalk, and they're pretty, you know, faithful users. But one of the questions that I did have from them, talking to a few of them one day, was they wondered if there was any chance that community services would look at some type of an accessibility platform so that they could at least get a little bit closer to the beach area. Like right now when you come out, there's steps, but they can't get close enough to the beach area. And I'm wondering, I just said I would ask the question around, you know, safety, accessibility or whatever, but that they love the boardwalk, but they never can get down to the beach area. So that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask.
At the Green Shore area is where you're, like.
Well,
yeah.
like it doesn't have to be every area
No,
where
but-
there's steps, but just somewhere where they would have access to get down to the beach when the tide is out and it's safe.
No,
And so I just said that I would ask that.
for sure, I'll have a talk with JP.
And then the other question, and we didn't have anything on the agenda, but it's a really important point with the Journal Pioneer in the situation that it's in. There's 155 years of history. And I had a resident that's very, very interested about the archives. Does anybody know what's going to take place with that 155 years of archives? Whether it's through the Historical Society, whether it's, there's just a real concern that we're going to lose that information of 155 years depending on what happens with the journal. So again, I just committed to bring that up on their behalf.
For sure, I know his worship has reached out to Saltwater, what is it, Saltwire? And have spoken to them about our disappointment in what is currently going on with the Journal Pioneer. My assumption would be that they would want to keep those as a record of their history in the newspaper industry, but as we should be making sure that there is a record of that going forward as a city, because it is an important historical part, but I'll leave that with.
It's already being done, isn't it, Brian?
Well, and Kerry can check on it with the heritage, with culture, but I think for the 150th anniversary, there was a complete archives done of
I
of
think
the
so too.
journal. That was done by Culture Summerside and folks at Lafergie there. So I think it exists, and I think I think the city has it.
I guess what this person had indicated was that there's boxes of archives that are in the building, and I think what their concern is say, depending on what the future is with the journal, what will happen to a lot of those artifacts and information on Summerside's history and all of the different things. So maybe if we could, through HR, Councillor Carey,
I know a lot of times now, print papers are put into a database that can be flipped through digitally, as opposed to keeping boxes of old papers, because then you get into the storage and everything else. So I would assume that that's being done regularly, that papers are being digitally input to some sort of database, but, right.
Standing up too.
Yeah.
When I was there, I know that there's actual newspapers from the 1800s in there. And I'm not sure where that is now, but I understood that a lot of it went over to, or with the cultural events. So.
Can I make a comment? Maybe Greg's first, Councillor Campbell.
No, I just wanted to, I'd asked a question already. I have a next door neighbor that bikes down on the boardwalk down in Mackenzie Driveway. And because of the legal distancing, he was wondering if we could get a couple more signs up pointing out the bike lane, because people are walking on the bike lane to get away when they're walking as couples. He said just for a heads up for the people. He pretty near ran into a couple of people when he was biking the other morning.
There is no bike lane, and no, but there is no bike lane, and we've had signage down there before, and I know people are, I don't want to say people are confused, but it's never been entirely clear, but we do have signage down there that indicates that the entire surface, board, pavement, whatever, is all shared laneways.
Right.
And we've never tried to restrict people from only walking in one area and only biking on another. And the signage indicates that it's all shared surfaces, and we ask that people be respectful of that, and so. Yep.
I think if there was any signage to go up, it would be to ask any bikers to be more aware of the pedestrians and the walkers, because I stopped one guy last week that was flying through, and I just asked him to slow down because I had a complaint from a couple that was
speeding.
Got scared.
Maybe we
Was
need
he
a four-way
speeding?
stop on him.
Yeah, he was.
If I could just make a comment on Councillor or Deputy Mayor's comment in regards to the journal. When COVID was announced, I called the owner, Mark Lever, about probably I think it was announced around the middle of March, probably a couple of weeks after that, and I had a long chat with him. And he said he would be over to see me as soon as he could get across the bridge. But then then this announcement was made. But before that, I had called him again, wondering how things were going. And then 2 weeks later, the announcement was made about the job losses or the changing. So then I called his office again, and I just left a message, and she told me that he would call me back tomorrow, that he was at meetings all day today, and that was 3 weeks ago, and I haven't heard back from him since. So I'm still going to keep trying to find out what's going on, and we'll just, if he gets back to me, and I get a feeling he will get back to me, because when I keep calling, he'll probably want to get rid of me. So whenever I hear back, I will pass it on to council. So that's all I have at this point. But so far, for 155 years. It's a shame we haven't got our local news. But anyway, we'll keep working on that. That's all I have, Madam Chair, on that. No, the Chair's had to step out for a minute. I believe, is that all there is on the agenda for committee meetings, Mr. CAO?
Yeah, Your Worship, just one item that we wanted to add to Committee of the Whole. I know we already have a HR item to address, but we'd like also to just take a few minutes to give Council a quick update on a property-related matter as well.
Okay.
During Committee of the Whole.
Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? I guess the Chair is outside. Maybe, sorry, Councillor Adams, did you have a question? Your light's on there.
I was just wondering, since we have Greg and Councillor Bruce here, if we could get an update for the residents on the street sweeper, because we've been getting calls on that. Do we know anybody?
I saw the dust flying out of it today, and I thought it was on fire again, but I really hated to call Greg.
I'm just, because I have
Sure.
some bikers with street
start off
bikes that,
I'll start off. I guess, Councillor Adams, we have received some replacement parts for the new unit that we have. In the meantime, we have had to address a couple of problem areas. We have had to rent a unit to address those areas of concern. Just in terms of when we expect our unit to be back on the road, so to speak. I guess, Greg, we were, sorry.
Sure.
we'll have to give it a minute. There you go.
There we go. So, yes, dealing with the manufacturer on the replacement parts, which were lost in transit for about a month and a half. Recently, they were just found, and there was an attempt by the manufacturer to come to site to modify the unit, which failed. They're now getting support from the factory of the unit, and the unit is to be shipped to them to be modified. So it will be probably a good few weeks or more yet before it returns to service for a test run. Currently, the city's position is it needs to perform as warrantied, and if it does not after modifications, there'll be discussion of returning the unit.
So it was on the go today, and it wasn't working properly, eh?
No, the modifications haven't been finished, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I kind of figured that when I saw it.
We have tried it in a few areas where we know it's getting really bad, just to try to facilitate some cleanliness. And in the meantime, we also had rented some other units to do some spot cleanup, but nothing regular. Just those areas that are getting really bad.
The one I saw today was probably taking the dust and the dirt off the street, but going on the windows of the houses beside it.
Yeah, for realistic expectations, I wouldn't expect the street sweeper to be back on duty until August, first week August.
So the one we had rented, I assume I seen an old Johnson, like the old one we used to have.
Correct.
Was going down water, and it looked to be doing a great job.
Mhm.
Are we keeping that in service while the other one's gone? Even, like, are we?
No,
what's our plan?
just the spot rentals for the bad areas that come in that are really notified by residents or brought to staff. We usually have hit those areas. For example, there was some gravel buildup from the barge along Heather Moist Drive and some other areas around Water Street East that was done fairly heavy. So we had picked those areas selectively to get done, and then we tried recently with the other street sweeper, but not really working that well.
I guess just my question, Director Gray. Oh, sorry, Carrie, go ahead. My question is, when we considered the purchase of that as a secondhand, was there any type of, I can't remember if there was any type of a warranty or anything with it for so many months?
Yeah, there's a 1-year performance warranty
Okay.
with the unit, so we're in talks with the unit supplier and the manufacturing of the unit, that if the modifications don't perform as expected, we'll be discussing on an alternative arrangement.
So you're keeping a paper
Thank you.
trail before the year.
Correct.
They've been notified. Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry, I had to scoot out for 2 minutes there, and I neglected to adjourn the meeting. So anyway, police services is now adjourned.
Thank you.
You're
So do you want to take a 2-minute stretch before we're grading the committee of the whole?